Welcome back. You're watching Invest Africa, where this week we're talking family businesses on the continent. And still with me in studio is Craig Steven-Jennings. He's a partner of Consumer Markets and Technology at KPMG. Jonathan Marks, director of the MBA program at Gibbs. And Ryan Bacchus is CEO of Bacchus Brothers as well. Gentlemen, let's get back into conversation because we started talking a little bit, Craig, about succession ahead of the break and planning in that regard. And part of good corporate governance policy dictates a succession plan needing to be in place. Do businesses get this more right than wrong in your books?
Difficult to tell, Alicia. Obviously, the businesses that succeed get it right, and those that fail get it wrong.
Good barometer.
So, yeah, it's difficult to tell whether more businesses get it right or wrong. But I think, what's important about this is that people don't try, or businesses don't try and do this too quickly. As Jonathan was saying earlier, it's a part of the life cycle of a business, and it's important that the founders and shareholders and family members see the succession coming and plan for it.
Yeah.
And they can do it in an organized fashion. I think that's the key.
Ryan, with you being part of the new generation emerging at Bacchus Brothers, what kind of succession planning does the company have in place? Just how planned was your emergence as CEO?
Well, I'm sure they all had hopes that I'd become CEO and do a fairly good job at it. So, me becoming eventually the CEO, hopefully it was a good thing. You can ask my uncles if I'm doing a good job or not. So, yeah, I was the succession plan. This is my 5th year of being CEO.
What did that succession plan evolve? How were you groomed to actually take over?
Well, I started in Bacchus Brothers when I was 20 because, remember, my father was on the property side. So I've spent the past, since I started working, between the property and the furniture side. 2 years here, 4 years here, 3 years here, 2 years there. And then we had 2 CEOs before me at Bacchus Brothers, and it was very hard for them to fit the culture, work with my uncles in a very strong family business. It was very, very tough. And then eventually my uncle said, "Look, Ron, step in. We need you. Give it your best shot. Be behind you all the way." So I owe them everything. They trusted in me, and when I stepped in, tried my hardest, and here we are 5 years later.
Is that characteristically what we're looking at when it comes to succession planning in businesses? How formal a plan do you have to be in place? What are the key ingredients that need to be jotted down?
I think what Ryan describes is quite a common path for succession, this sort of apprenticeship model. So you start fairly young in the business, you often start in a fairly junior position, you get to know the business, and over time you begin to grow into part of the leadership of the business. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that model. I think it's a great model for succession planning. But I think we're seeing other models emerge as well. And I'm interested particularly in succession planning around the wine industry and family-owned wine farms, where traditionally a farmer's son would have maybe followed in his footsteps. Now we're starting to see, for instance, the children go off and get an MBA, learn about the business, and then return with a different set of skills. So I think that both models are valuable, but I do think we're seeing them emerge in different ways.
Can I just add on to that one? When I started in Bacchus Brothers, I went straight to the warehouse, and I was dispatching goods. I worked on the trucks. I was carrying furniture into the
ground
so you learn the business
carrying
from the
furniture
Earning your stripes.
earning the stripes, starting from the bottom, so I could get familiar with everything. Then eventually, at our one showroom in Dunkeld, there's a basement which we called the bargain basement, and I was the bargain basement manager. So I had to make sure things were ticketed and everything worked like that. And I was a young little lighty running around trying my hardest. And then also my uncle Norman's got a son. His name's Dean. He's my cousin. He's starting to be a CA, and he also, when he started, when he's on holiday, comes in straight into the warehouse on the trucks delivering furniture, just so that you can get a feel about it. And just so that you can just see all the
and that a
types
healthy
of aspects.
balance as well. You highlighted one of the cousins within the business and looking at, getting a qualification and learning the nitty-gritty of doing business under the Bacchus Brothers roof.
I think, sorry, Alicia, just to add on to what Ryan was saying now, what's good about the process and the reason the succession has worked in Bacchus Brothers is because the business can see that Ryan has grown up through the business and has earned his stripes. So you're not shipping a family member in at the top to take over the reins who doesn't know the business.
Look, staff and their opinion is everything.
Yeah.
And if You want to
But
look
that
after your
perception
staff.
is out there.
You know, if your
absolutely.
staff are happy, your customers are happy.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
well, Jonathan, let's
Sorry,
shift
Jane.
focus a little bit to the listed environment, because certainly a retailer that's come under severe criticism for the structure that it has in place is Pick n Pay. Many of its shareholders saying that the structure is inhibitive of unlocking value. The other shareholders don't get the value that they should out of the business. So it shows that there is a very fine line that we're looking at here, and a tightrope that needs to be walked.
I think Pick n Pay is a great example, and recently they have come under a lot of criticism. I think that criticism probably comes from people looking to unlock value from the company. So whereas I think that the business remains a family-owned business, and I think the Ackermans have done an amazing job at planning their own succession, their role in the business. While we know that one of the Ackermans is not the CEO of the business now, I think that they've made that choice consciously. But I think that they've retained family control, and it's given them a few things. It's given them the ability to take risks, because being the largest shareholder, they're able to take some risk. I think it's remained entrepreneurial, and I think that that's a huge advantage to the business. So I think that that's allowed it to remain a successful South African enterprise and still fulfill the mandate of a family business with a very strong culture that I think is still within the business and ultimately came from
Well,
Raymond.
it's strong debate that's raging in South Africa, because you've got those that have that view, you've got the others that say, you know, it's the family structure that's impeded their growth and their growth strategy, specifically on the continent as a whole. Craig, how do you know when it's time to let go completely? At what time do you say it's time to bring in an outsider, or to start considering it anyway?
I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, Alicia, around key performance indicators. You need some parameters, you need some benchmarks in place that are clearly measurable. And when the results that the business is delivering are not delivering against those key performance indicators, which are agreed upon by a set of executive directors, non-executive directors, a family council, whatever your governance structure is, that's an indicator that perhaps the business is not performing the way it might be, and that an independent outside advisory capacity is required. So that's what I would suggest in terms of the benchmarks and parameters.
Yeah. Is that something that you agree with, Jonathan? Because a couple of years ago, I came across a stat that only 32% of family-owned businesses expect to remain in family hands.
I'm not sure I fully agree with Craig. I think that the objective for a family business is often different from the objective for a business that's held predominantly in public hands. And I think the imposition of structure and things like KPIs on a family business is difficult. Because really, while I think Pick n Pay is clearly not in that space, family businesses are often lifestyle businesses. They provide a particular lifestyle to a family, however large that might be. I think in the listed environment, we do begin to nudge up against what Craig has to say. How do you manage this business professionally, especially if you have institutional investors, while at the same time fulfilling the mandate of the family? So I think it's an incredibly difficult balance to find. I'm not sure that Pick n Pay was designed with a view to it ending at some period, so I'm sure that succession is an important issue for them, but I think we've seen that begin to happen. But what we're seeing here is the difference between succession planning around shareholding and succession planning around management. I think Pick n Pay has clearly moved into the professional management space, but there are issues around its shareholding.
Ryan, is this something that Bacchus Brothers has ever considered? And I know that you're new to the helm at this stage, and I guess verbalizing it here today would make you more of a target moving forward. But is this a consideration that you've ever made, whether it be selling off to a private company, a public company, or private equity player? I mean, has it been a consideration?
I'm not going to say no for the long term, but for the short term, I think we'll carry on as the way we are.
What would make the family change its mind?
Depends how much money's on the table.
It's all about the price tag.
We'll see. We do have ambitions to expand. We've got all strong systems in there. It is now, I brought in all the technology and all that, so we can track the business and manage it better. So we are very interested in expanding. We don't have stores in Cape Town or Durban.
Is this expansion something that you do completely by yourselves, or are there business partners that you've brought on board along the way?
No, we would do that ourselves, and we would promote staff within to manage, look after stores, go and run stores. We have decorators that go around constantly making sure our showrooms are always looking to the quality that we'd like. We are always promoting internally.
Price tag aside, when we were chatting off air, you highlighted that it may well be a consideration to let go of the business if there was no effective succession plan in place.
Well, like the gentleman was saying, so 32%, or like you said, 32% of businesses don't believe that there is going to be that's because they might not have someone there to take it over within the family. So if they do have someone that they've been grooming and they have faith in, then I'm sure they would say, yeah, there is a strong possibility that the company is going to carry on and be a success.
Of course, if you are looking at exiting the business, something you've got to take into consideration is the kind of corporate culture that is going to be, is going to evolve as a result of that. How do you manage that? Because to an extent, the business was a success because of the family's way of doing business. How do you make sure that that corporate culture translates?
It's very tricky, Alicia, and I think what I've seen certainly in practice is where the ownership is transitioned into corporate hands, it loses the culture that Ryan was describing earlier, and it's very difficult to retain that when the ownership and the executive management has moved into corporate hands. Ultimately, the CEO of any business dictates the tone and culture of that business. So it is very difficult. What you'll often find in this kind of transition into corporate hands is that they lock the CEOs or the family members in for a certain period to try and retain that connection to the staff, that culture and that ethic within the business. But ultimately it's not sustainable in the long term. The business may indeed be a success, but it won't be the family business that it was if it is transitioned into a corporate business.